This is a test of the English language channels. We're testing the English language channel for today's meeting here in the Nordic Council in Reykjavík. So this is a test Nordic Council meeting in Iceland, Reykjavík, and we'll switch to the second console.
This is the second council in the English booth. We're testing the English channel. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mikrofonen. Ja. Hallo. Kan vi måske begynne? President Asphjell, vicepresident Orten, kjære nordiske venner.
Dear Nordic friends and dear Icelandic listeners, welcome to all of you. It's very nice to see all Nordic friends here. However, we do not only have Nordic friends, but we also have representatives from the Baltic Assembly.
I am very happy to see you all once again here in Iceland. A few months ago, in September last year, the Nordic Council and the Baltic Assembly together organized a meeting here in Harpa to discuss the effects of the Russian invasion into Ukraine and ways to help the Ukrainians. We had great guests from Ukraine and opposition leaders from Belarus and Russia. For me, and I think for all the members of the Nordic Council, it was an invaluable and emotional experience to hear about the struggles and hardship faced by those on the front lines fighting the autocratic and cruel regimes of Russia and Belarus. The meeting in September was made possible by the deep knowledge, insight, and contracts of the parliaments of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to this part of Europe. Thank you for that. I am sorry that we didn't listen earlier to the warnings from our Baltic friends about the dangers posed by Russia. I hope we have learned our lesson now, and we will listen more carefully in the future. Now the Baltic Assembly is planning an Eastern Partnership Conference in May, partly to follow up on the September meeting in Reykjavík. I very much hope to be able to participate there. Our friends from the Benelux Parliament have a close cooperation with the Baltic Assembly, so I presume that they also have benefits from the advice and support regarding the situation in Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. Regarding the Benelux Parliament and the Nordic Council, I think there's a lot of unused potential for a more intensive cooperation and exchange of experience given the similarities between our organizations. The smaller countries of Europe should work closely together to defend and strengthen our common values, democracy, rules of law, and human rights. A warm welcome to all of you here in Iceland. It seems like when we have our Nordic friends here, we always have the sun shining. I know it's very cold, but at least it's very nice to have the sun and you guys with us. I also want to use this opportunity to welcome Steinunn Þóra Árnadóttir. She is the chair of the West Nordic Council, a very important partner to the Nordic Council. And also Karen Ellemann, new CEO of the Nordic Ministry Bureau. I think it's an honor to have her with us. She has visited Iceland before, and it's good to have all her political knowledge also. So I'm looking very much forward to the cooperation between the Nordic Minister Bureau and Nordisk Råd. But I think I will now give the floor over to our president, Jörad Asphjell. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bryndis, for this warm, or rather the cold welcome here to Iceland and to Reykjavík. It's always an honor to come here to the Saga Island. It's always quite exotic to be here and very exciting both with the culture, the food, the drinks, and all the social gatherings we always have within our Nordic cooperation. So thank you so much for the warm welcome. On behalf of the Norwegian presidency, I would like to welcome you to this session on energy and security. The title is Nordic Energy Supply at a Time of Uncertainty. The topic is on the agenda based on the Norwegian presidency program prioritizing a safe, green and young Nordic region. The backdrop of this session is gloomy. There is a war in Europe. One of consequences is a crisis when it comes to energy supply that has been inflicted on us by Russia. The topic is very closely related to the situation in Europe, in the Nordic region, and in our national states in connection with the energy crisis that we are suffering. In the Nordic cooperation, we seek to improve the security of supply in the Nordic region, in line with the vision of the Nordic region as the world's most integrated and sustainable region in 2030. This is an ambition we have, and we have to put this into effect every day in our decisions, also within the Nordic Council. With today's energy and climate crisis, there's no doubt that we have a double urgency in order to reach the targets, the climate targets, but also secure access to stable energy supplies in our region. At the same time, it's important that we find solutions that people can live with it, organizations and also companies, so that they keep the confidence in us as politicians at all levels, be it at the municipal, regional or national level. It's important that we, as elected officials, keep their confidence so that we can defend the policy that we have defined. I look forward to interesting presentations throughout this day. I'm sure that we will have very good discussions and learn a lot from each other in a good Nordic spirit. Exchange experience between the Nordic countries is particularly important at a time like ours. The program for this debate is double. First, we have specialist introductions and then a panel debate. And after, we will have a plenary topical discussion on energy and security. To lead us through all these discussions and the presentations that we will hear, I have the pleasure now of inviting up to the rostrum our moderator this day, Bogi Augustsson. Please, the floor is yours.
Takk, Jorod. Vi må holde på, fordi at tiden er begrenset. Som Jorod sa,
Well, as has been said, my name is Boje Augustsson, and I have basically been working most of my occupational life for the Icelandic radio television company, and has also been working on and off for Danish public service. I've been working with the Nordic questions for some 40 years. I've also been a correspondent living in Copenhagen, reporting on Nordic issues back in the 1980s, and I've also been active in the association the Nordics in Iceland. But this is not about me. This is to be about the Nordic energy supply at a time of uncertainty. And we're here going to get to hear from Terje Aasland, the Minister of Petroleum and Energy in Norway, and that will be via video.
Dear Nordic friends, I would really have liked to be together with you in Iceland in order to learn and participate in very useful discussions in the field of energy, because we're at the point where the energy system is under pressure. According to the report from Nordic Energy Research that you will soon be hearing more about, We are now facing a trilemma. Security of supply, sustainability, and prices pull in different directions. And the main thing here is that we stand together at a time where our energy systems are under pressure. It's been said that no person is an island. Iceland is perhaps an exception. They are an island and they have their special circumstances. Norway, on the other hand, as a part of the mainland Europe, is an important energy provider to Europe, but in order to secure this energy provision and the climate target, we cannot just be isolated. We need to be together, and we need to find a solution across national borders. We do that in the Nordics. We have done that for a long time. We've had a power exchange since the 60s in our region, and in many ways we can call this a success story. This cooperation will be very important also in the future to secure a well-functioning electricity market so that we can back to a situation with sufficient and affordable energy for the businesses and for the society, and also new technology like CCS and hydrogen. In order to go on with this success story, we need to stand together. The Nordic Council has had energy cooperation on the agenda since 1962. They represent a framework uniting our countries with ambitious targets for the transition to durable and sustainable energy, which must be there for the green shift. Countries that supplement each other's and profit from each other's strengths. We all can go on with this success story in order to achieve the vision that the Nordic region should be the most integrated and sustainable region in the world in 2030. I wish you great luck with this energy summit, and I hope to see you around next time.
Thank you to Terje Aasland, the Minister of Petroleum and Energy, Norway. And we're going to continue with Hallarton Lagadottir, who is Director of the National Energy Authority of Iceland. Please.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. Pleasure to be here with all of you. I will spare you with my bad Danish and continue in English. Can I have the slides up, please? Let's see. We'll hope you keep the energy level high while we wait for the slides to appear. If it's easier, we may also continue with the next speaker and get back to me, whatever you prefer.
Det tror jeg faktisk er en god idé. Mens vi finner ut av de tekniske.
And that might be a good idea. We have some technical issues, and therefore I will now ask Klaus Skutte, Director of Nordic Energy Research, to come up on stage instead. And then we hope that we will not have any technical issues here. Klaus, please go ahead.
Jeg har også brug for nogle slides, så jeg håber, det virker nu.
Well, I will also need to have some slides up on the screen, so I hope that we can get it to work. We are in the midst of an energy crisis, and that is nothing new. We had the same thing happening in 1980s, where our energy ministers saw a need for collaboration, where we needed to work together politically and also with research and innovation. We also have the climate crisis, and we see how that has led to new technologies like wind power, how we now work closer together. And that means that the crises have delivered Nordic solutions that have then been used and implemented. The current energy crisis is nothing different, and we have to remind ourselves that we should see opportunities instead of just focusing on what is gloom and doom. And it is important to ensure that we get strengthened out of this crisis. We're well positioned to secure our energy supply in the Nordics, and we have to make sure that we do this in a sustainable manner also when it comes to the financial aspects. And we are in a dilemma, or rather a trilemma, where we have energy security, energy prices and sustainability that are pulling in different directions. And that is why the Nordic Council now needs to act, and Nordic energy research is something that is now available. The publication online, everyone can download it. Our purpose is to create a basis for decision making that can be used so that we can learn from each other and also focus on the future that we have ahead of us without too much concern. We have 5 steps in this analysis. 1, that we should look at the Nordic energy systems and understand the extent of the crisis. 2, that we have to find the driving factors behind this. 3, that we need to look at the impact, risks and factors. 4, look at the effect of different action. And 5, that we need to have recommendations and decisions made by politicians. And here I would like to say that the analysis has focused on collaboration in the Nordics within the area of electricity, where we are more integrated. We also have natural gas, heating and other energy supplies that are linked to electricity, where we can collaborate. But we have a good collaboration when it comes to electricity, where we work across borders, and we have a good foundation for additional cooperation. 2 years ago, we saw electricity prices going up in the Nordics because of what happened with Nordic hydropower storages and the COVID lockdowns in Europe and other factors as well. Now we see the effect of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and this means that the Nordic population now is experiencing higher energy prices than we've seen for a very long time. And how come our energy system has been impacted to this extent? Well, here it is important to understand that the energy crisis is complex, and we have identified 8 drivers that, well, together make up a perfect storm behind the energy crisis. Here we have the phasing out of regulatable sources, and also the fact that we have changed production and the capacity that we have in our infrastructure, as well as inflexible use, and also the dependencies on imports, the reduction of natural gas supply, and also the production that is dependent on weather in the Nordics. And, well, 8 driving factors, but here it should also be said that the energy crisis is something that is impacting us in many different ways, and that is something we have seen in this crisis, which means that these different factors also have an impact in many different ways, which means that the different Nordic countries have implemented different action to assist the Nordic citizens based on what has been most suitable for the particular country. Could be reduced prices or grants that have been given out. And what we have done in the report is that we have looked at the different factors, we have looked at the different types of action that has been taken, and also the effect of these different type of action. And then we have some recommendations as well. In the report, we have identified, well, different recommendations, what we can do in the various countries, and also what we can do together in a Nordic context. And at the national level, the first recommendation is to look at the processes in the various countries so that we can get the green transition going as quickly as possible. It's also about ensuring that we have the right skills and competencies and looking long-term at various competencies so that we get to true sustainability. It's also about involving citizens in this. Otherwise, we might get resistance from the citizenship. So we have to have an inclusive process. In the Nordic perspective, well, what we can do together is that we can increase the interaction that we have. We can look at the various sources of energy production that we have. And it's also about facilitating the collaboration, ensuring that we have trust in each other, and ensure that we work with the different technologies that can cooperate, work together. And we also need to cooperate in having additional capacity up and running. And we have several good examples as to how we can involve citizens, how we can get the acceptance that is needed to get the necessary infrastructure up and running. And here as well, we can learn from the other countries and get good examples from each other. We also should work for having a more flexible use of energy amongst the citizens at a national level, but this is also something that has an international aspect. Could be that prices are different in Denmark compared to other countries, for example. We should also strengthen the Nordic infrastructure so that we can work across borders. And we also have to promote the importance of the Nordic collaboration. Because that is something that can have a positive effect. It is also about building experience together and also ensure that we together can get what is needed in terms of a critical mass, so that we can become the most integrated, sustainable region. And that was a very rapid presentation of our recommendations. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions, and the report is publicly available. You can download it from our website or from norden.org. Thank you.
Tack, Klaus.
Thank you, Klaus.
Som Klaus sa, så blir...
And, well, Klaus has already mentioned that you can ask questions, and we will have a Q&A session, a panel, after we have heard from the other presenters. And we're still working with the technology. Nope, we have that in place. So Hallar Rindlagadottir, Director, National Energy Authority of Iceland. Please.
Tack ska du ha. Okay, so we're going to cover energy security, and I'm going to do it in the context of Iceland. We've all are very well aware of the current crisis that Europe has been facing and is currently facing. But meanwhile, as many of you know, the situation in Iceland has been quite different. You can see how stable our energy prices have been. This is a comparison to within the Nordic family. And the main fact is that we are basing our energy utilization on our local resources, on our local renewable resources. And just as a reminder for some of you may know this already, 99% of Iceland's electricity comes from renewables. 9 out of 10 houses, like Harpa, is heated with geothermal, and overall 85% of our energy is coming from renewables. We also have this uniqueness in the sense that we are an isolated system. We export energy. We do it through products like aluminum, but in terms of being connected to the market, we're not. We're simply isolated. We also have kind of the difference that intraday electricity usage is very stable in Iceland. Now, why is that? It is very stable because we have 80% of our system are consumers that are very stable. The heavy industry, the aluminum industry mainly. So there's little fluctuations within the day. The state of the market is also different. The fact is that Iceland's energy markets is not very developed. Most of the trade goes through Landsvirkjun, our biggest energy producer. However, there is development happening in this space. I will say that the benefit for consumers here have been large. The stability of the prices that this system involves has brought extreme steadiness to the prices for consumers. So one of the challenges in designing a market is making sure that energy security for households and smaller businesses is secured, and the stableness of prices is secured as well. I mentioned how our electricity prices have been stabled. The same has more or less applied to our geothermal prices, the geothermal that we use for house heating. We're talking about, if we think about a house around 130 square meters or so, the cost of heating that house is about $65 per month. So relatively cheap as well, and has been cheap, has continued to be this cheap, given the fact that we are using local resources. We've been blessed with that during the energy crisis. Okay, so I went through these figures, but I wanna take a step back and talk briefly about how this happened. And why do I want to do that? I want to do that because there are some lessons that apply to the decision making and to the future that we all want to see. I want to do it through the case of geothermal because the policy lessons are, I think, very important. This is a picture from Reykjavík in the early 1900s, and you can see the different very well on a sunny day like we have today. And the main reason here is the geothermal district heating system. But my favorite part of this story is actually that it very much started with entrepreneurship, with entrepreneurs finding a ways. In this case, farmers found a way to connect their farms to hot springs. That was scaled by municipalities, and eventually it became a national policy issue. It started small, like any big journey. Started with the main public school in Reykjavík and the hospital heated with geothermal. And from these small success stories, the big journey took off. And it actually had become a voting issue, a public debate, a political issue already in 1938. Then it was about environment in the context of clean air. As you can see, it was vote for geothermal, vote for the clean air, but it was also related to energy security. And that energy security drive was the main push for Iceland investing in the infrastructure that we still rely on today, that has got us through this energy crisis with this stable, in this stable way, is the fact that during the energy crisis in the 1970s, when energy prices became extremely high and it was very expensive for Iceland to import fossil fuels. That is the time frame where the government made very brave policy decisions in actually investing in the infrastructure that we rely on today. Some people ask, wasn't this difficult? You have these volcanoes, isn't it easy just to use them? I mean, of course, we have the access to resources, but it was a really difficult task. And I walk this path. There's a path here in Reykjavík on my way to work, and I walk it in the morning thinking about, wow, there were people that really made this happen and didn't really have the skills or the knowledge. They just went ahead and tested it out, and it worked out. So this is maybe the key message that I want to bring forward here today, is the fact that, the crisis today is an infrastructure crisis. And the infrastructure that we invest in today is something that we may not see the fruits of it right away tomorrow, but it is the infrastructure that future generations will rely on, not necessarily in this energy crisis, but in the future ones to come. So it is really important to focus on the investment piece. And then this question, how to fund it, always becomes at the center of the political debate, right? And I have to say that it was also another brave element, that there was an energy fund that still operates today that funded this geothermal investment journey. And from 61 to 83, over 350 loans were issued around Iceland, building again the district heating systems that still keep our houses warm. The role of the Energy Fund continues. Right now, we are in the phase of closing the final 15%, and those are challenging final 15%. We're talking about transportation, we're talking about aviation, and we're talking about shipping. So the timeline is obviously an issue here. In transportation, the technology is ready and can just be implemented. But as we know, in aviation, there's more steps. Even though many things have happened, there are more steps to be taken on a global scale and in shipping as well. If I share some updates on Iceland's transition when it comes to transportation, you can see here the orange line, no, the blue line representing completely electric cars. You can see that has been going up. If we compare ourselves to our friends in Norway that we like to look towards, you can see that they're doing even better. We are behind. We're number 2 in this field. You can see that as well if you compare kind of the overall statistics. Iceland, you have fully electric cars are about 7%, while it's over 20% in Norway. We have no excuses in Iceland not to take bigger steps, and actually our Minister for Energy has been putting a strong focus on addressing this issue, for instance, by investing, providing support for car rentals that buy a big part of the cars to Iceland, so focusing on them is really important. We're also a couple of years behind Norway when it comes to new registrations in light commercial vehicles, but the trend is the same. The trend is always the same, and the policies have so far been pretty similar. This is then my favorite, one of my favorite days last year is when we got our first little electric plane to Iceland. Imagine this. You can just plug it in like your hairdryer and fly away. So a lot of the interesting things are happening in the electric plane space. Iceland is actually really well situated in the context, like many other places in the Nordics and in the Arctic, for using electric planes for domestic flights. There are issues, weather and so forth, that we need to deal with, but the technology is there and is developing fast, and our main carrier, Icelandair, has been taking some ambitious steps in this field. Example of challenges. There are multiple challenges that was mentioned here before, how to get agreement in society about infrastructure. I think that is one of the main challenges, and it remains one of the main challenges for how to close the 15%, how to close the energy need gap that we are foreseeing. And you can see here different forecasts, but the numbers are high. And that is one of the main challenges of the political debate here in Iceland today. Another example of challenges relates to a new energy technology like wind power. The government is currently working on a policy around that, but I think that's an excellent example where we can learn so much from the experience of other Nordic countries, from Denmark, from Norway, and so forth. Meeting investment needs for the grid is another key barrier where we must put a much bigger focus on, and the same for the distribution system. Investing in the right type of infrastructure now is really the fundamental key for the future. So I think it's inspiring to see what is happening in different parts of the Nordics. I think that we have such a big opportunity to collaborate and continue to be leaders in the field of energy transition. So let's be stronger and greener together, and I look forward to continuing the discussion during the panel debate. Thank you, or takk.
Thank you very much, Halla Rund. You have given us an overview of the situation in Iceland, and we will also hear something about the situation in the other 4 Nordic countries from Jarand Rystad, CEO, Rystad Energy Analysis and Consulting Company. He is with us on the screen. Thank you very much for this opportunity that I have to speak to such an important forum as the Nordic Council. I hope you enjoy Iceland. I would like to say a few words about the big industry and climate picture first, and then I will focus on the Nordics. I will start with quite a complex slide. You don't need to understand everything that is written here, but I'd like to present this to you in order to say how we analyze the global energy system. On the left-hand side, you see 10 sources of primary energy. It needs to be refined to molecules that you can use. You will find this in column number 2, refineries and electrolysis facilities, or to power plants producing electrons, column number 3. And they are then transported to the end users on the right-hand side, buildings, transport, and industry. And at any given time, this system needs to be balanced. Summer, winter, year by year, land by land, country by country, and during the day. So you need to consider what kind of storage technology you need when the world becomes more and more renewable. Then you have solar and wind, which are non-regulatable sources. So we try to use all these data in order to construct data for the future, in order to secure that all consumers in the world get the energy they need. And then we need to have a look at a few solutions. This is a solution on a long time horizon from 1961 to 2100. What you see is here is how solar and wind on the top is pushing coal, oil and gas out of the market. So that is the main picture here. And the logic is such that in the green shift, you first need to build solar, wind, batteries, and other renewable energy. And this energy will then, or this power will then oust the fossil power, because the production or the operation costs are much lower with this new energy. So you cannot succeed with the green shift in order to stop oil, gas, and coal, but you will do it if you oust oil, gas, and coal by constructing renewables first. So you see that the world is moving towards a green mix already in 2050. 70% will be renewable in this mix. If we now look at how this energy is transported to the end users, you see that we move from 20% is being transported as electricity today, and the whole world will be electrified, and 60% will be then transported as electricity in 2050. 1/3 of this has to come from batteries because of the non-regulatable character of solar and wind power. So the question is, how soon can we build this capacity that we need? And we have taken this into consideration in the model I'm going to show you now. This is the quickest way we can have a good story to tell for the supply chain. And finally, we have what the end users use the energy for. You see that buildings, energy, and industry get more access to energy, even if the primary energy is reduced, because the loss connected to fossil energy is 2/3. When you burn petrol in a car, you lose 2/3. And also, if you produce energy or electricity with oil and gas, you will have these losses. This is not the case with renewables. The losses will be lower, and you will have more energy for the end users, even if the primary energy is lower. So what about the picture I'm showing you now? Can we agree in what the economist said, say goodbye to 1.5 degrees? Or should we believe our own climate minister in Norway? You see the sticker on his jacket, 1.5 degrees. It is a symbol that we still believe in this possibility. Well, we need to have a look at the climate budget of the UN climate panel, and they use this, and we use this as an input to our models. Can we succeed with 1.5 degrees, 500 gigaton, or 1.6, 650 gigatons? That scenario is the most aggressive we can hope for when it comes to carbon emissions. And we take into consideration the energy mix, as you can see here. You see all the carbon emissions here from 1.4 global warming up until 2.5 degrees global warming. And what I'm focusing on is 1.6 degrees, 650 gigatons. And to answer this question, we have to also take into consideration the emissions of methane and nitrogen oxide. And we have good possibilities now to reduce the methane emissions by artificial meat, by handling rice cultivation by lower emissions, or also by working on the landfill issue and bring it over to incineration. And that gives an upside, especially with methane. That's what I believe in this scenario. Another thing is, of course, a terrible war in Ukraine. Energy security is now on the agenda everywhere in the world. Not only do we want accessible, affordable, and sustainable energy in the world, we also want to have security of supply. And this is what we see in all European countries, and we have big differences here. We see two exporting countries, Russia and Norway, and all other countries are net importers of energy. And we see that the Nordic countries are a big or relatively big importers of energy. You see the percentages here, how much energy you need to import. Traditionally speaking, whole of Europe has been dependent on Russian gas and oil from the Middle East, Norway, and also from Russia, of course. Without the Russian oil and gas, and also the wish that you want a cleaner energy for the future, what does Europe need to do in order to address this question? The answer is that the renewables are not only the cleanest, but also the cheapest form of energy in most countries of the world. We have end users that use electricity instead of using molecules, like the electrical car. And if we look at the scenarios, we can say something about the green shift. And what can we say about the Nordic region? If we look at the wind power ambitions offshore in different Nordic countries, you see there are huge ambitions. 104 gigawatt have been described in projects in these three countries. surrounding the Baltic Sea. Not all these projects will be realized, but these are ambitions that have been defined by these countries. And we see that at least half of these are already in the pipeline. So if we look at the energy balance here in Sweden, for instance, they can move from a deficit to a surplus of energy in 2040 because they are focusing on wind power. Biopower is also very important, both in Sweden and in Finland. Of course, very connected to the big forestry industry and the use of biomasses in the industry in connection with the pulp and paper industry, both in Sweden and in Finland. And they also have nuclear power and some hydropower. So we see a scenario where Sweden, Finland, and also Denmark, they can move from energy dependency to energy independency if they build up especially offshore wind power in the future. So there are huge opportunities and possibilities here, not only when it comes to the renewables, but also CCS, carbon capture and storage. We have big possibilities. We have geological reservoirs that are very suitable, and we have point source emissions that are well suited for carbon capture in an economical way. And we also see hydrogen growing as energy carrier. You see all the projects that were planned in Europe, and we see that amongst these, Denmark has 5 of the 19 biggest hydrogen projects in Europe. So also here it is possible for the Nordics to show the way. And we see that hydrogen will grow as energy carrier in the future with ammonia for the shipping industry. For instance, we see many of these companies are commissioning dual fuel already today. Also within aviation, hydrogen has a big potential because it is light and energy intensive as the fuel. And finally, within the steel production, where Swedish companies already are leading when it comes to green steel based on hydrogens instead of coal as a reduction agent. So again, we have seen that there are very big opportunities here in the Nordic region. Good luck with your discussions, and thank you very much on behalf of Rystad.
Ja, tack Gerard.
Thank you, Gerard. It's nice to hear from an optimist who believes that we will be able to stick to the 1.5 degrees. We're now going to continue with a panel debate. We'll also invite participants to ask questions. And if you want to do so, please raise your hand. And start by introducing yourselves. And we do not have all that much time, but hope that we have the participants up here. Also Ola Olvesson from the Committee for a Sustainable Nordic Region, who will participate in this debate. And before going to the first question, I would like to hand over to Ola Elvestuen, because we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any comments to what you've heard up until now?
Has your compatriot made you more optimistic? Yes. I've heard Göran Rystad also earlier. I think he has a very important message. The most important message from the climate conference in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, which is that the target of 1.5 degree still is possible to achieve. And he also says that there is a competition when we talk about renewable, solar and wind, and this will be economic. But the challenge is to have a quick development here. And you know that You all know that. It's not just a question of having the cheapest energy, but we need to build this up. It's not very simple to create the regulations and to install planification and take the decisions that are needed. But what he is saying is extremely important. He is saying this is possible. That is his message. And the second thing is, when you listen to this, we are talking about the crisis of the prices in the Nordic region. Okay, but still, the crisis is in Ukraine. That is where the crisis is. They have to defend themselves against the aggression from Russia. And what we need to do is to make changes in order to reduce the emissions quicker than before. And this is something that we will benefit from also in the Nordics. It's important for us to spearhead this in development. And if we're able to do that, both when it comes to renewable energy, hydrogen production, etc., we will not only be able to supply this to ourselves, but we can also export this energy to the rest of Europe. So what we see here is a huge opportunity. And the example that was given by Iceland was interesting. Iceland, they do this for themselves, of course, but they are also spearheading this development by attacking the most difficult 15% here. They are an example to others because what they do is what we all should be doing, not only in Europe, but globally speaking. We have three big things we need to do: reduce the use of fossil energy, and we also need to protect the nature, physically speaking, and also establish a global market economy that the nature can support. At the same time, we have to defend freedom and energy. And we don't have much time here to do this. And also in the discussion, says the moderator. Would you like to make a comment to what Ole just said? Or otherwise, I have a few questions here. Ole said that Iceland is independent, autonomous when it comes to energy. And there has been a discussion in Iceland as to see if it wouldn't be sensible to connect our electrical grid also to other countries. There are advantages, there are disadvantages with this. And we have seen in other Nordic countries that you have a lot of fluctuation in the electricity prices. That has been avoided in Iceland. But Halla Rundt, maybe you have a comment to this topic?
Very much, thank you. This is a very important question that has been much debated in Iceland, as you say. First, to echo and kind of add a bit to your thoughts, I think it is indeed a lot of possibilities in the world to take back steps forward. However, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that it's going to be very different depending on regional situations. And if we look at the globe, there are few regions in the world, if any, that are in as good situation to really complete the energy transition as the Nordics. So we are very much in a privileged position to take the big steps together forward. In the context of the interconnector, you know, it has pros and cons, as you mentioned. The political focus has been right now on completing Iceland's energy transition, using the energy we produce locally to actually complete the final 15%. That is, you know, we're talking about a large amount of additional energy, and it's going to be challenging to complete that energy transition by doing it while preserving important parts of our nature as well. So I think that has been kind of the focus of the political debate now. We are, one can say, exporting 80% of our energy through exporting aluminum. We have benefited, maybe one can say, by not being connected to the European energy market during this crisis. So whether that will be a feasible option for Iceland in the future maybe remains on how much we will produce and what type of industries will thrive in our economy.
Close.
Så
The interconnectivity is advantage when you want to have a cooperation, because you can then transmit or transport energy from a country to another. But we need to remember that the green transition is the same for everyone. If you're in Greenland, Iceland or elsewhere, it is important for us all, and we need to collaborate and cooperate. We don't need to transport electricity. We have good examples here of green fuel for shipping and other industries. So we have other energy carriers, but I think we can improve the Nordic cooperation also when it comes to energy through that. Yes, thank you, Klaus. We have a question from someone here. Yes, left green. I heard 3 very encouraging presentation about what we can do, but I haven't heard any considerations as to if we can organize our society so that we will reduce our energy consumption, and preferably something that we can do quickly, that we don't need a long transition period. That it would be possible to achieve this if we have another way of consuming or using energy in the long term, in the long run. Okay, any comments from the panel? Is it possible to reduce our energy consumption? Thank you for your question. It is very relevant. 1 kilowatt hour saved is, of course, very important. So, and a lot of things are being done with energy effectivization. And one thing is that if you achieve a green shift within transport, that will be very important also for consumer. And consumption patterns are also very important here. Energy labeling and other things are important in order to help the consumer to use less energy.
The cheapest way and the fastest way of getting success. And we can see it. I just landed from another part of the world, the United States, where the opportunity in this field, as in Europe, is enormous when it comes to buildings and so forth. So it must be a part of our focus. And I think a lot of things are actually already happening in that space through European Union regulations and so forth. But changing consumption all of this needs to come together if we want to stay within the climate goals, that's for sure.
Ola?
Yes, of course, we need to also rationalize energy and save energy, but we also need to give people the possibility to control their expenses. It's not only the quantity, but to give them this possibility. At the same time, we need to follow what's happening in the world today. We have a Norwegian debate, probably elsewhere in the world. We need more renewable energy, not necessarily to cut the emissions, but to create new activity. Battery plants are popping up everywhere. When you have clean energy, there is a proposal on international data centers that people want to establish. So there is a tendency that new industry are moving towards renewable energy. You will see this in northern Sweden, for instance. So you need also to be conscious about how to prioritize the renewable energy, and that we develop a Nordic market where someone also needs to pull out in certain periods, because we need to keep this balance in the energy system. And I think that there we need a better cooperation amongst us. Yes, the moderator is not supposed to take part in the discussion here, but I'd like to point out that there are also a demand for a higher energy consumption. PricewaterhouseCoopers have published a report about this in Norway, I think it was, in November, and we need to double the quantity within 2030. So not only do we need to save, but we need also to develop green sources of energy. Yes, thank you. You mentioned that we are a privileged region, but we have a lot of minerals and raw materials that we need. They come from the global south. What should we do in order to obtain a just transition for them as well? Will we continue to have access to these raw materials to continue developing renewable energy in a fair manner? Last question from the room. We have only 5 minutes left. Who wants to answer the question? I don't know if I have an answer, but this is also a very big problem. We are in a world with a security situation where we more or less have a dual world. We have Russia in Europe on one side, but we also have China on the other side, which dominates many of these value chains. And cooperation is needed in Europe with Northern America, and in order to obtain other value chains where we can control the whole of the value chain. And of course, I mean that like the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have a cooperation there in order to preserve the rainforest. So the objective or the goal mustn't be to pull out, but we need to be there in order to use this as a possibility also to lift the working conditions that we find in some of these countries, wherever that is possible. Yes, I don't have any comments here, but we see that our dependency on rare minerals and also fossil fuels, that is a factor of insecurity that we need to address. We can do what I heard from my colleague here to become less dependent of certain minerals, depending on where they come from.
Important question, the question of just transition. I think in terms of global commerce, one needs to think about resource rents, prices, best practices, and so forth, while doing business in the context of security of supply. In the context of Europe, if we look at that part of the world, it is going to be interesting how a close collaborator and a friend, Greenland, will enter into that discussion, given the fact that they hold the biggest reserves in Europe when it comes to many of the minerals that the world will need for the transition. So that's going to be interesting to follow how they will enter into the field.
Tack. Får jag säga tack till...
Thank you very much. I would also like to say thank you to Jarand Rystad, who was with us on the street, and to Klaus and to Hatla. And we will now have a 5-minute break before the next session. Yeah, we start at 10:02. And finally, I would like to quote what Klaus just said, that the Nordic countries need to continue to develop the Nordic energy system and in line with the vision as the Nordic region as the world's most sustainable region in 2030, which is the goal for the Nordic Council. And I will conclude by saying that we will continue doing this and we will be a leader in this work in the Nordic region. Thank you very much.
Da er det viktig at alle sammen finner sine plasser. Ja, gode medlemmer av
Dear members of the Nordic Council, ministers, observers, and not least our guests, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this theme session. We have just finished the technical seminar that will help us as a backdrop to the debate, and their inputs were very good. We heard some via link and some via presentations in the room with follow-up of questions. Very good. I'd like to remind you that we are now embarking on the ordinary sessions. We have interpreters at the back of the room, so we must always remember to turn off the microphones when we're not using them, and also to remember to speak clearly and slowly so that everyone can understand. And I hope that you can understand my accent, and that I can understand you. It's an honor as the President of the Nordic Council to be able to welcome you to this theme session in Reykjavík, Iceland. The theme session is an important item on our annual program, and we then focus on the various topics that are important for our Nordic programs. When we came together at the last theme session, that was in Malmö in Sweden last year, and we were then still shocked that Russia had invaded Ukraine, and this has also had left a mark on all the meetings and sessions in the Nordic Council in the past year. But fortunately, all the bodies, the governments in the Nordics have also strongly supported Ukraine in the very demanding situation they face. We've given both political support, but also economic and military contributions in this difficult phase that they now find themselves in. As we've heard, our own energy situation is vulnerable, and it's particularly vulnerable in the present situation. And we will be hearing more about that during the theme debate. And the theme for this theme session is Nordic energy supply at a time of uncertainty. And, I mean, nothing could be more topical than this. The Nordics, like I said, have also stood in solidarity with Ukraine and their populations, and we have discussed this in the Presidium today. We have gone through the feedback from all the Nordic governments when it came to the contributions that they have given Ukraine in the past year, and also with the current status in the present situation. But, dear colleagues and friends, it's a pleasure to come together again to sense the common Nordic pulse, and also we are 87 delegates with all the representatives, and I think that we all truly feel at home in the Nordic cooperation across political parties, across the Nordic states and our different roles. And with these words, I would like to hereby declare the Nordic Council Theme Session 2023 open.
Da skal vi ha en del programposter.
All right, there are some items of the program that we need to formally go through. The first is the approval of the list of participants, document 2B 2023. And the proposal, the draft list, is available as document 2B, and also you find it on the norden.org home site. And I also point out that the latest version of the agenda and other documents are available there. Can you approve the list of participants? Yes. Next point, 1.2, approval of the agenda. We need to approve the agenda that is found in document 2C. It's on the website. Can you approve the agenda? Yes, hereby done. Next item is 1.3, rules for the conducting of the theme sessions. This is in document 2A 2023. It's now important that you pay close attention or that you read up on these documents that have been posted, because there are speaking rules for the Nordic Council's members and government representatives, and the Presidium proposes that all presentations of proposals, reports, presentations and speeches are done by the rostrum, that is to my left and to your right, and that Nordic Council's members and government representatives have 3 minutes to present their proposals and considerations, as well as 2 minutes for other speeches in the debate. The spokespersons of the party groups should, as far as possible, also be given the floor in proportion to the size of the groups. If you want to sign onto the list of speakers, please raise your blue-green card. It says 008. It's a blue-greenish color. So then you raise your card. Or you can contact the secretariat to my right. They will always be present, and they're very accommodating, very nice people. So that they can also note down your speaker number. As for replies, we propose that all replies be made from your own rostrum, and that you can do it from your seats. You can press the button to ask for the floor. And you have 1 minute for any replies. If you wanted to make a reply, you need to signal that during the speech, the speaker on the rostrum, or at the end of that speech. We need to be clear on this so that we really understand it. And the ones that you direct your reply to should be given the opportunity to respond immediately. And therefore, we ask speakers to remain at the rostrum so that they don't have to move up and down if there is any question. And of course, it's up to the number of replies and people who have asked for the floor, but we'll address that as we go along in the debate. And also, we can also give the same member or government representative the possibilities for up to 2 replies in the same exchange of replies. I mean, you can't do as many as you want, but it's limited to up to 2. And if you want to sign up for the list of replies, then raise the brown card. It says reply, so that the secretariat next to me can note down your number. As for number 2, on the topic of energy and security, the Presidium proposes that Iceland's Minister for the Environment, Energy and Climate be given 5 minutes for an introduction, and that also the Vice President of the Nordic Council then be given 3 minutes to summarize the debate, while other guests have the right to speak under the item Energy and Security, and they will then be given 2 minutes for speeches under this item. I believe that these are the matters that we need to address during today's session. I mean, there are some who have already asked for the floor, and I'm quite sure that we will see their names on the screen behind me, so we need to see their names, and if any others want to ask for the floor, then please indicate so. As for any votes, I think that we will revert to it because there are no votes today. And to A, I mean, here there are, of course, the speakers. We have the Youth Council, and we also have guests, and also others on the Norden.org Åge, can you approve the speakers that have been there? And the first speaker is I just have to find my papers so that I'm quite sure that I give the floor to the right person.
Ja, vi går nå over til neste punkt på dagsordenen, nemlig aktualitetsdebatt.
All right, next point on the agenda is a topical debate, the Nordic energy supply at a time of uncertainty. As we've just heard, they are the experts, and they've also then created a new situations, and one of the consequences is an energy supply crisis that is high on the political agenda. And then we also hope that they will also create some focus on the possibilities. We're happy to see the guests from the Baltic Assembly and the West Nordic Councils, who will also contribute to the debate. First, number one, is the Minister of Energy of Iceland, Guðlaugur Thor. And where are you? Thordarson?
Forseti, þingmenn Norðurlandaráðs og aðrir gestir.
Alle sammen må ha på
Dear delegates, Nordic Council, dear guests, being the Minister of Energy, I would like to start by thanking you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And we're discussing an issue that is top of most of our agendas. The Nordic countries now have to meet these challenges that we're facing in uncertain times. We're in the midst of an energy crisis due to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And the citizens of the Nordic countries have not been spared from the situation that has been created by the war. Our role as politicians is to protect the general public. And here in Iceland, we're still vulnerable. We have seen a few price increases, but we have a market that is not connected. We are self-sufficient and we have renewables. This is a country where most things, as a matter of fact, are pretty expensive. I guess you've noticed already. And energy is more or less the only thing being cheap compared to other places. And that is exactly the way we want things to remain. And we're grateful towards those who made decisions here decades ago during the latest energy crisis in the 1970s, where they did decide to start an energy transformation, moving towards geothermal energy, domestic energy, in order to keep houses warm. Without that decision, we would be much worse off today. And it is, as a matter of fact, also a matter of national security, something we know, all of us today. The energy transition, however, has not been completely transformed. We still have to continue work with our transport systems, and we have very objective targets to have a energy transition that has been completed by 2040. However, this is an enormous challenge that we are facing. And we have decided to work with domestic energy, and we will need to double what we produce today to reach our objectives, if we're also to cover road transport, aviation and shipping. And this is, of course, an even bigger challenge for countries that do not have the same proportion of renewables. We have, for example, what we've seen from the European energy body, that there is a pent-up demand across the globe. We have a report that has been presented that tells us that we can improve our energy security, the security of supply. We also have recommendations to the countries as to how to improve things. And the main proposals we can give our support, it's about speeding up licenses, strengthening infrastructure, and also looking at social aspects. And the report tells us that we needed to work with the so-called energy trilemma, where we have to work with sustainability and also manage the crisis. And we have these three areas where we need to be successful. And it's not just about producing sustainable energy, it's also working in harmony with society and ensure that we have a transition that is socially just. This is a very delicate balance. We also have to protect nature while we use these resources. And it's through that balance that we will be successful in the future. We can support the objective towards sustainable development without preventing future generations from being in what is our vision today, the most integrated sustainable region in the world. Mr. President, delegates, in the Nordic collaboration, we see many opportunities where we can be much more successful if we collaborate compared to dealing with these challenges individuals. You could say that this is the perfect storm, and we see challenges that we've never seen before, and this is where we do need to cooperate and find solutions together. I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your views and comments here in the Nordic Council. Thank you.
Tusen takk til Gunnlaugur.
Thank you, Gunnlaugur, for your introduction. We now open the floor for any other contributions. If there are any comments specifically for you, you will have to come up on the rostrum again. But thank you very much for your introduction. Yes, I may leave.
Da skal vi gå nedover.
All right, we'll move down the list of speakers. And the Presidium has appointed some who will give an introduction on behalf of the Presidium and then on the party groups and other bodies. And you have 2 minutes and you can address it from your seat, and you can see when your name comes up on the list of speakers behind me. And of course, if you want to ask for the floor, you need to notify the Secretariat. We don't have a clock up here, actually, so we will point or nod more pointedly towards the various members who have the floor to indicate that the time is up. Next speaker is Oddny Harðardóttir on behalf of the Presidium. She represents Iceland.
Sæl kæru vinir. Til þessa þing.
Dear friends, welcome to Iceland and to this sessions where we have set out to discuss an important issue, namely the energy supply in the Nordics at a time of uncertainty.
En við verðum þó að halda.
And we have every opportunity here in Iceland to create a green, just transition. However, there are numerous challenges. Nevertheless, the main challenge here in Iceland being fuel for vehicles, and it would be very beneficial for us to be able to take that step as well. More than 80% of all energy that is being produced in Iceland is used for our industry. Used by companies and also for heating homes. So we do have, I guess one could say, enough energy. The question is how we use it, and also to where we sell our energy. So one could say that we have enough, and road transport would require about 5% of what we produce, which is a good position, and it means that we need to prioritize for the future. And we also need to look at our employment policy so that goes hand in hand with these measures. We have to have something that is sustainable and socially just. Today, we have no proper guarantees when it comes to how our energy is being used. Oftentimes, the question is posed, how much do we need to increase our energy production? Of course, the energy crisis is a serious threat globally, which means that we needed to increase collaboration between countries, also looking at production. And, of course, another important issue is to decrease energy poverty. And here as well, we need to reduce energy consumption. I'm looking forward to hearing your views and comments.
The next speaker is Stein Erik Løvaas from the Center Group, representing also Growth and Development Committee. All right, I'm looking at you, for example, if also the speaker remembers to take a look at me. All right, I've listened to your warning. Thank you. I would like to start by saying that the reason why the energy debate has been revived and been stronger than before is, of course, Russia's attack on Ukraine and also the shutdown of gas supplies to Europe. We needn't forget that. The question is how the Nordics can help solve the need for energy, while at the same time also attaining climate goals. It's not easy to answer these questions, and there are many opinions. I noted that some believe that we should go from full isolation, namely keep the power generated for yourself, to those who want full integration, namely saying that we need to build more interconnectors between our countries. But what we can agree on is that we need even more investments in the research on renewable energy, and also on how we can get the renewable energy sources up and operating as quickly as possible, and also how to distribute it more efficiently, namely how we use the national grid. I believe that these are some common denominators that we can address. And there's also this element of research and development, because Mr. President, I believe that we still need to understand that the various countries also need to make their own decisions about which power to generate, how to develop their national grids, and also which international agreements they want to enter into between neighboring countries or with multiple countries in one agreement. But we are convinced in our committee that we believe that there's also a room for action and possibilities to cooperate more closely than we're currently doing. And if there's any region in the world that has a good point of departure, then it must be the Nordics. We have the knowledge, we have the economy, and we have confidence and trust in each other. And with all these elements in place, it is also possible to create sustainable services and products. And also, energy is something that we all need across the Nordics, regardless of which country we represent. Thank you for your attention.
Yes.
All right, if anyone wants to ask for a reply to any of the presentations, please use this one, because I don't see any indication on my screen about who wants to do that. No one seems to have asked for a reply. And then next speaker is Camilla Gunnell.
Thank you, President. Dear Nordic friends, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has reminded us how important it is that we become fossil-free and self-sufficient when it comes to energy. And there is a lot of Nordic benefit in working together with energy and the green transition. In addition, we now have new topics on the agenda. For example, energy security. This is a new area for us to collaborate around. We also need to share and develop the expertise that we already have in our Nordic countries. For example, the Norwegian know-how on oil, gas, Iceland, geothermal energy, and in other Nordic countries as well. We have knowledge on nuclear, offshore wind, biofuels, circular economy, and we have also heard today about the Danish projects being underway, which means that there is a lot of knowledge that we need to share and deepen. We have to work together, we have to work quickly, and we have to make the right adjustments. The clock is ticking for the climate. We do not have much time to stop global warming. In the Committee for Knowledge and Culture, are we convinced that we need more shared knowledge within the field of energy, and we also need more in-depth discussions about the green transition and what it needs in terms of new skills amongst labor, training that corresponds to the needs of tomorrow and also the needs of the green labor market. We also want to remind you that inspiration, awareness, knowledge about sustainable development, well, this is something that needs to be taught in schools, and here we need new materials and new methods. We also want to remind you of the power of culture to make the need for a green transition clearer, and here as well there are many things we can collaborate around. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see that anyone has asked for a reply. Then we move to Stefan Eklöf, next speaker, representing Nordic Freedom Group, representing Sweden. And you may also ask for a reply during a speech.
Tack så mycket, herr ordförande.
Thank you, Chair. This is on behalf of the Committee for a Sustainable Nordic Region. Dear Nordic friends, using sustainable resources and sustainable energy is decisive for the Nordics to become the most sustainable region in the world. Already today, 57% of the energy that is being produced in the Nordics is renewable, compared to 22% in the EU. Renewable energy is key. But that goes for other fossil-free energy sources as well, like nuclear. Even if the situation differs between the different Nordic countries, it is, after all, about reducing the use of fossil energy and detach the growth of societies from carbon emissions. We have seen growing welfare, and we've seen reductions in carbon emissions at the same time, and we are to continue that way for us and for the world around us. We have many resources for renewable energies, a lot we can use, technologies and resources. And here we need to be careful and not waste these resources. We need to strive for efficiencies when it comes to energy policy and environmental policy alike. We need to find efficient solutions, and we need to look at energy quality. And then, of course, we also have the kilowatt hours that do not necessarily need to be produced. That is the best kilowatt hour, which means that we need to continue our work with energy efficiency here in the Nordics. We should be proud of what we have accomplished, but we can do better. That we have seen through the Russian aggression in Ukraine and also through the climate challenges around us. The transition, moving away from fossil dependencies, means that we need to have massive investments and restructuring. We need to have long-term solutions, looking at needs and solutions, and we need to look across energy sectors and across country borders. The Nordic countries have to collaborate. We also need to continue to develop infrastructure to get rid of bottlenecks, and we need to do this wisely so that we do not harm biological diversity, and it cannot have too much of an impact on citizens either. For example, offshore wind parks. Here we have to look at ecosystems of the oceans and species that might be impacted. And it is a green transition that will change energy production, but we also need to remember the populations. We cannot create solutions that will create problems and resistance. That might make things more difficult. We have to work systematically so that we can ensure security of supply and do not cause any harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. All right, I would like for someone to bring us a clock so that we could pay attention to the time. No one has asked for the floor. Next is Johan Andersson, representing the S-Group from Sweden. Please, when I knock on the table, your time is up.
Tack för ordet, herr president.
Thank you, Chair. Now, with the Russian aggression of Ukraine, we see here in the Nordics that while we experience runaway energy prices and problems with the security of supply and also other components of the energy issue. And here it is incredibly important that the green transition that is now underway in our Nordic countries and security of supply, well, these two components need to go hand in hand. This is not an easy task. We heard certain voices in some countries, particularly in those Nordic countries where we have an export of energy, that are now talking about how we should end exports. And it's also about secret energy prices and other things that have been addressed. And we've also seen for some shorter periods of time very high energy prices. We've seen that in our respective countries where many have had the difficulties paying their energy bills and other things as well. And here as well, of course, we need to look at a bigger Nordic context, looking at the export of energy. In our Nordic countries, well, we have overall high prices for exports, and I'm sure that we could work even more with an integrated energy market. There are good examples showing us where we can make each other stronger through collaborating across Nordic borders. And we need to look at how we can transform our energy production, moving to renewables without creating a situation with extreme energy prices that would have an impact on the purchase powers of consumers, competitiveness of companies, and where we would also create more of a dependence on fossils. We need a strategic foundation not to accept these things, and we need to solve this task together. And that might be the most important task for all of us here being active in the Nordic Council today. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Next speaker is Simon Holmström, representing the Center Group.
Värderade president.
Honored President, a horrible war is now throwing all of Europe into an energy panic. We also see extreme weather in many of our countries, reminding us that the climate crisis is here and now. You usually say that a crisis is an opportunity for change, for transformation. And is this the crisis that will finally get us to take the necessary decisions? The answer this far is no. After the most recent UN summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, we find that the countries of the world have not kept their climate promises to reach the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees. We're rather headed towards 2.5. Europe has not started to use fossil-free sources at a rapid enough pace, and we see that the fossil sector is now having a boom instead. The terrible aggression has shown us that our dependence on fossil fuels is a big threat against a peaceful, sustainable development of societies. As long as we build our societies and our economies on coal, oil and gas, we risk being in the hands of autocratic and undemocratic forces, and we also risk falling under the impact of nature's brutal forces on a heated planet. And working in a targeted way with our climate policies, therefore, the most important thing we can do. We have to disarm aggressive autocracies. We have to look at our own climate objectives and ambitions. This far, the Nordic work has been mainly about sharing experiences, supporting projects, and adopting beautiful declarations. That is good, but not enough. We now have to move from that national patchwork to something that we do together. We have to stand united and strong, working with the climate in all societal sectors. And that is why we, Center Group, feel that this is important. We need to invest in technologies, we need to have integrated networks, and we need to establish more renewable energies, not least offshore wind power. We have to show that we can go stronger out of this energy crisis and towards a more sustainable society.
Next speaker, I believe. No one has asked for the floor. It's still possible to ask for the floor for any replies after each speaker. I want you to know that. Next speaker is representing Norway from the Conservative Group, Liv Kari Eskeland. Dear friends, President, we are now in the midst of very demanding time. Energy supply has become just as much a security question as a question regarding energy policy. Putin is using energy supplies as a weapon in his warfare, and this is a weapon that everyone in Europe is impacted by through a shortage of energy resources and high prices. Like Nordic countries, we each have good resources for stable energy sources such as nuclear power, hydropower, oil and gas, and also variable sources such as solar and wind power. Energy should be our contribution to ensure as good, stable energy supply as possible, both for our own consumption, but also to meet Europe's need for energy, particularly the need for oil and gas. But energy distribution also need new metals, new substances, and new compounds, materials for battery production, as well as uranium for our nuclear power plants are such examples. And this means that we must also be willing to contribute to extracting such resources that can help contribute to this area from the Nordic countries. We can't just point to other countries' resources to achieve our goals. This will take wisdom and joint action, because we know that the extraction and recovery of such resources may also be sources of potential conflict of interest that involve groups of interests and inhabitants. We face both a natural crisis and an energy crisis, but we live in the part of the world that should be best equipped to tackle these issues in the best possible and democratic manner. We can't expect other countries to resolve these challenges on our behalf. Thank you. And thank you, Liv Kari. Yes, I mean, you stayed within your allotted time excellently. Next speaker is representing Sweden, Lorena Delgados Vargas.
Tack, herr president.
Thank you, President. The war in Ukraine has an impact, and at the same time, the energy needs are increasing globally. We'll see that in Europe and in the rest of the world over the next few decades. The increase in energy consumption has to do with the developments of populations, but also the climate transition. They will both require their share of the assets and the wealth of this planet. If we look at this from a historical perspective, here in the global north, we have to reduce our consumption at the same time as the global south has to have a right to develop their societies. We're not an isolated island here in the Nordics. How we produce and how we use energy will have global consequences. Historically, we've been talking about coal, oil, and gas that has dominated production. This is not sustainable and something we have to continue to prioritize to move away from. Not having invested enough in renewables, well, we have had to pay for that in increasing electricity prices. By investing in renewable energy, we can keep costs down, the costs for the climate transition, and we can also increase energy security, which means that we would take our responsibility for future generations. We need to build and we need to ensure that we have renewables. At the same time, it's just as important to work with energy efficiencies and reductions in consumption so that we can, in an efficient manner, reduce our future needs of energy. Unfortunately, that reduction of consumption is often sometimes that is forgotten because it would mean us changing our behaviors, and that is not something that is too popular. But the energy transition is something that has to happen soon, and through renewable production. We also have to ensure that changes are accepted in local societies, and we have to be better when it comes to returning profits to local communities so that they can participate in developments, for example, by getting training, new job opportunities, or investments in critical infrastructure, access to culture, etc. We also have to ensure that energy supply is part of a modern society where we have to have models where we recognize that energy production is something that we have together, that is created with collective resources and something that should benefit everyone. And that is how we can create safety, security also in uncertain times. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. All right, we now have a clock on our screens. And we're happy for that. Now it's easy to follow, so there's no excuse if you want to exceed your time. Next speaker is Marius Aron Nilsen.
Uavhengig.
An independent representative in the Nordic Council. He represents the Progress Party in the Norwegian Parliament. President, members, today we are discussing a very important topic here in the Nordic Council, a topic that has not been addressed seriously enough by our politicians lately. Energy supply, security, and energy consumptions. We have seen that if we go back to 2019, the EU planned to stop funding gas project. The European Investment Bank, EIB, new energy lending policies included to put a full stop to funding gas-powered plants in the EU due to climate considerations and also business considerations and the like. The German energy vendor, then we saw that 6 billion kroner has been spent for the energy vendor the past 15 years in order to develop unregulatable power, at the same time as 15 or 17 regulatable power plants have been closed down. And they have also shown that the importance of energy supply and also given way to the secure supply is really important. But of course, when Russia invaded Ukraine just over a year ago, then that has resulted in putting this on the agenda. We cannot actually say that there's no doubt that energy is critical for the infrastructure and also that climate policy cannot take priority over energy policies. And we produce and deliver 7 terawatt hours of oil and gas every day, of which 4 terawatt hours goes to Europe every day. And this is the exports is equivalent to Denmark's power production 10 days. And we also see that the Baltic pipeline to Poland that was opened last autumn reduced the climate emissions by 70 million tons of carbon annually. And there's also a 40% cut. And if we look at the voices who want to close down the oil sector, I say that it's important that we continue because the IPCC and IEA's 1.5 degree scenario for 2050 indicate a need for 25% of the current oil and 50% of today's gas consumption a day. And it's impossible that we deliver a lot of this. And I look forward to a further discussion and hope that we can discuss it seriously and also truthfully and with the scale that it deserves. Thank you.
Takk til Marius.
Thank you, Marius. We have the Nordic Youth Council representatives. I don't have a name of that speaker. Yes, you are there. Thank you.
Medlemmar.
Thank you, President, honored members, participants. My name is Oskar Sameland and I represent the Youth Council, the Green, Safe, Young Nordic. The Youth Council totally agrees with the priorities of the Norwegian presidency. A green Nordic, the energy production makes up 70% of the emissions of the world in CO2 equivalents. And here in the Nordics, we could spearhead developments because our energy production is more or less fossil-free. But we need to act quickly. We need to extend production, water, wind, solar, nuclear. And the different countries in the Nordics have different preconditions, but everyone needs to contribute. A safe Nordics. Well, here we have to look at our energy supply. It has to be resilient and be able to be resilient towards fluctuations and internal and external threats. This is something that is key for safeguarding our welfare today and tomorrow. And here we have hydro and nuclear that would represent that stability. Young Nordics, increasing energy prices is a contributing factor to the high inflation. Increased prices on transports, food will have great consequences, not least for the younger population because they already have low income and it's difficult to get the money to last. With the young Nordics, well, here we are also looking at the future, how to have a greener, safer Nordics in 20, 30, 40 years. When trying to find solutions for this crisis, we also have to look at the need of the younger generation and their concerns. We owe them to have green, safe energy systems so that they can flourish and live satisfactory lives here and in the rest of the world. Thank you.
Tusen takk. Det var
Thank you. Also, I mean, you didn't even use the time you had available. Next speaker is one of our guests, namely Steinunn Aradottir. She is well known in the Nordic Council and represents the West Nordic Council. Steinunn, you have the floor. President and dear friends, thank you for the invitation that was extended to the West Nordic Council to participate in today's debate. The increased energy prices in the Nordics because of Russia's attack on the Ukraine, in combination with the changes in the energy supply, has then resulted in a focus on security of supply and also social sustainability related to energy and security, and also prices and affordability. And it shows that Europe and the rest of the world needs to get better at self-sufficiency, cooperations, and green, sustainable energy. And this also applies to us in the Nordics. We in Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland are not connected to the European energy grid. And we are also nations in harsh climates, and we know that self-sufficiency in this context is something that we need to have. And there's also be competition because it used to be so that self-sufficiency was related to a different topic, not necessarily this topical debate. But this has become more topical after Russia's aggression in Ukraine. There is a relations between the self-sufficiency of energy and security of supply. We discussed this in our meeting, among other things, how we consume energy. President, very often when we talk about the Arctic or the West Nordic regions, then we talk about how strategically important this area is. And the West Nordic Council would like to remind you that to us, this is mainly about our homes. It's important for us, regardless of how the world develops, that this is an area with low tension. This is a time of turbulence. There's war in Europe, and because there was also war in other countries. And the climate challenge means that we want greener energy situations in step with the ambitions that the Nordic region should be the most integrated and sustainable region. In order to achieve this goal, we need to cooperate. We need to engage in research together, and also to apply the knowledge and science that we have to find future solutions. Thank you very much.
Takk til Sten-Gunn.
Thank you, Sten-Gunn. Next speaker is
President of the Baltic Assembly. The floor is yours.
Dear President of Nordic Council, dear colleagues, in the name of the Baltic Assembly, I thank you for the invitation to attend your theme session. In this short speech, I want to call for closer energy cooperation between our organization and the Baltic Nordic countries. Both our organizations are close partners for more than 30 years. Energy cooperation has been one of the priorities of most of this time. Our cooperation in this field has improved, but of course there is a lot of room for improvement. Our countries continue to look at energy as a national issue. Too many problems are being addressed individually, despite that the regional approach brings much more benefits. The Russian war in Ukraine opened our eyes. Once again, we realize that cooperation is much more important than competition. The Baltic and Nordic countries have close regional ties and mutual trust in each other. We need to use this power to protect our region, our citizens, and Europe from import dependency, threats that climate change brings, high prices, and also, of course, many security risks. Dear colleagues, it is in our hands to demand more cooperation in energy from our governments. We have many success stories in the energy market that can help to create a full integrated Baltic and Nordic energy market based on clean, safe and affordable energy. And here I would like to repeat what Hala said in first session. Let's be stronger and greener together. In conclusion, I want to remind us all we have the benefit to address the energy crisis in this safe and peaceful state. But Ukraine has to solve the same problem and many more in the state of war. Let us not forget to support Ukraine's energy and electricity grid, but also country's way to victory over Russia. Thank you.
Noen som ønsker replikk?
Does anyone want to ask for replies to Giannis? That's not the case.
Yeah, Reuters from the Benelux Parliament.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Benelux Parliament and in my capacity from Vice President of the Benelux Parliament, I would like to express my gratitude to the host of the Nordic Council for inviting a delegation of the Benelux Parliament to the annual Nordic Council Theme Session in the great city of Reykjavík. Our contact with the Nordic Council are one of the most successful forms in interparliamentary cooperation. In response to the energy market disruption caused by the war in Ukraine, the European Commission published a Repower EU plan. In this context, the Benelux countries continue to work together to ensure the security of energy supply while paving the way for further electricity and renewable hydrogen trade. Driven by the geostrategic urgency and Europe's green ambition, the Benelux will promote the further development of hydrogen energy. On 16 June 2022, the Benelux Parliament adopted a recommendation on the hydrogen strategy. The Benelux has built up a lot of experience in the field of hydrogen, and we are always willing to share this experience with you. In order to establish a robust hydrogen market, the recommendation of the Benelux Parliament focused on some measures that are in the meantime integrated in the hydrogen policies of the government of the three Benelux countries. The Benelux countries aim to promote the production of new renewable hydrogen at a low cost, the development of sustainable clean hydrogen technologies, a competitive hydrogen market, and the development of common market rules. As the Benelux countries do not have enough renewable resources to cover their own energy demands, we need to position our ports as an import and transit hub for renewable energy in Western Europe. The North Sea is one of the major renewable sources located close to the Benelux countries. It benefits from favorable wind streams, which allow the production of renewable hydrogen at low cost. The Benelux countries wish to pursue the development of a hydrogen transport network. Such a network is already present on the Belgian and the Dutch territory. This network supplies various industrial customers spread across Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. The Benelux Parliament, has requested the governments of the Benelux to set up a cross-border Benelux hydrogen valley and to support the development of European or international certification schemes for the labeling of hydrogen possibility. The Benelux country will not be able to achieve alone the goals of the hydrogen strategy. We need to further continue the collaboration and the exchange of best practices with our Nordic and Baltic partners. Thank you for your attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to Patricia Krautz, and nå det Lene Westgård Halle Vær så god, ordet ditt ifra den konservative gruppen av Norge.
Takk skal du ha, president.
Thank you, President. Dear Nordic colleagues, Norway has been an energy nation for more than a century. The hydropower formed the basis for our industrializations, and clean, affordable energy has been a competitive edge and contributed to value creation. All right, good for Norway. Many people think, all right, do you need more money? But what does that have to do with the Nordic region? Well, it has allowed us to share our hydropower resources with other Nordic countries. We have exported energy, not only oil and gas, but also clean hydropower. Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine has also impacted our energy markets and created a perfect storm, high energy prices and potential shortage of energy. Russia accounts for around 40% of the European gas supply, and a lot of the energy supply in European countries is based precisely on gas. Even though it's good that we can help supply gas from Norway, it's just a temporary solution. We need more renewable power, we need more solar power and wind power, more hydropower, more biopower, more of everything. But if this is to benefit the Nordic region, we also need to exchange power between our countries. This means that we need to import wind power from our good friends in Sweden and Denmark when we don't have any reservoir levels that can allow it, and also to export such power. The investments in sustainable sources is more about the power supply. It's about the security, it's about the future of our children, and it's about the general energy situations. Therefore, politicians need to weather the storm, and that applies to all Nordic countries. We cannot make any short-term populistic solutions. We need to continue to exchange and to transfer energy between our countries. This will help ensure lower prices and make us less dependent on regimes such as Russia, and it will benefit all in Europe. Thank you. Thank you, Lene Westgård. Last speaker on my list is Hanna-Katrin Fredriksson, representing the Centre Group in Iceland. But before you start, I would also like to ask the Minister of Climate and Energy if you would like a 2-minute speech before the summarizations. You may have it, indicate so. Next speaker, Hanna.
President, kjære venner, jeg skal tale på
President, dear friends, I'll be speaking in Icelandic.
Það óhætt að segja að
one can truly say that the horrible aggression that we have seen, what Putin has done towards a neighbor, that has been a wake-up call for Europe when it comes to energy. Energy supply has sped up processes when it comes to security of supply. We have been listening to many interesting speakers. It's been great fun to listen to all these comments. It is now very important that we continue our work. We're facing enormous challenges, even if the situation is pretty good in the Nordics. We have to continue to address the question of energy security. We also have to remember the environment. We have to act in such a way that we work in hand with the nature, but also with our citizens. We have to look at how funds are being used. And now we have to choose green energy, and we have to make decisions concerning infrastructure. In the Nordic Council, we also have to address the importance of us focusing on these issues. We also have to focus on the younger generation, and we have to work towards a situation that will allow for the younger generation to do better. In Iceland, here as well, we have enormous challenges that we're facing having to do with energy. Our energy authority that produces 70% of all our energy, well, they see more of a demand, and we have to ensure that we have enough for consumption. We also have to have energy that will be needed by innovative new companies. I hope that these decisions will be seen as something that was possible when future generations look at what we did compared to how we look at the 70s.
We have one speaker on the list, but we don't have time for it. We have a tight schedule, so we need to move to Minister Guðlaugur. He has 2 minutes for a concluding remark before the Vice President of the Nordic Council ends this debate.
Það hefur verið ánægilegt og
All right, it's been interesting to listen to this debate. And to summarize the debate, we may say that we can all agree about all the goals that we will try to achieve, not only climate goals. It has also we also see that this involves a security aspect for our countries. And when we decided to increase our procure energy from a country like Russia, an undemocratic country, and that has also impacted on the security situations. And Ukraine now feels that they have to defend themselves from an attack from Russia. This is not only about the present situation, but also about the future. We need to bear in mind that nature is also very important, and the future generation must also be able to enjoy nature and resources, and also benefit from the resources and spend energy as we have. Most of us know and have said that in order to achieve our goals, we need to cooperate. And let there be no doubt that we can lead the way and show others what it's possible to achieve. And therefore, I know that there is a great need for us to continue our good cooperation towards this end. Guðlaugur, you have been here throughout the debate, and you also had an introduction and your contribution to the debate. Thank you very much, and we will then conclude this theme session by the Vice President Helge Orton for your contribution. Thank you, President, dear Nordic friends, and also for good discussions on a very important topic, and also against the gloomy backdrop of Russia's aggression in Ukraine. This session shows that it's important to come together, to share knowledge and find good solutions together. There are many things that bring us together, both in the field of energy policy and other areas, and not least when it comes to finding good initiatives and measures, and to set good targets for where we want to head. And we also had some technical experts in the introductory round, and it's all clear that we face a trilemma when it comes to sustainability and affordability and security of supply. Energy prices is very current based on the situation we face in Europe. We have war. Not all countries can also be considered as stable suppliers of energy, and this has also contributed towards destabilizing supply, both in Europe and in our areas. Secure supply will probably also be an important topic when it comes to security policy, but also in other areas where we need to safeguard energy supply chains to safeguard the supply of important raw materials that are key to the future development of our countries and also the development of the Nordic region as a sustainable region. We also need affordable prices, stable prices, and the lack of stability we now face also is a challenge for the common effort we need to make in order to successfully complete the green transitions we face. We need to move from fossil fuel sources to more sustainable and clean emission-free sources, and we are going to transition and restructure our society, and we need to do that jointly, not separately. The ambition in the Nordic cooperation is to strengthen the security of supply in line with the Nordic ambition to make the Nordics the most sustainable and integrated region by 2030. I believe that we can do that. Also, maintaining and succeeding in meeting the 1.5-degree solutions. Together, we will also face the situation that the whole Europe faces. We'll do that through good measures, but also in cooperation with the rest of Europe. The next item on the program is an excursion to the geothermal plant. Hellisheiðir, I hope I pronounced it well. We're going to learn more about geothermal energy productions and also inspiring and good technology. And thank you for participating in the discussions. I'm looking forward to this excursion. Thank you. Thank you, Helge Orton, and thank you, everyone who has participated in the debate with good interventions across the Nordics, and also the minister who at short notice were able to be here during our sessions. We will now move outside to the buses and visit the geothermal plant. I will not even try to repeat the name. Please make sure that you have a warm footwear and coats. Buses are parked just outside, and there's some food that we can take with us when we leave. Thank you for participating in this theme sessions, and then I also wish you the best of luck and for an interesting program now this afternoon. Thank you.
Tack Helle.